Right now, Russia is falling apart. Putin's regime is cracking at the seams. On the front, a real meat grinder, the occupiers lost the battle for winter, defeating the war next. Nothing gets calmer for them. Drones don't let them sleep at night. Shock! Russians have nowhere to be safe, even abroad. Iran went off the rails. Russians screaming terror under Iranian Shaheds. What happened? Even Putin's shadow fleet is unlucky. The dictator is hysterical. His main ally destroyed his beloved tanker. Russia is sinking into catastrophe, so let's talk about it. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. Maria Farafonova here with the latest updates. Ukrainian defenders continue to crash the enemy on the front. Over the past 24 hours, the armed forces of Ukraine repelled 145 enemy attacks. The heaviest losses among the occupiers were recorded in the Gulay-Pole direction. Over the past day, the enemy carried out more than 3,500 shelling attacks and launched over 8,000 drones at Ukrainian positions and settlements. In response, aviation and missile forces of the defense forces struck a command post, an area of troop concentration, and an ammunition depot of the invaders. 3 artillery pieces and an enemy UAV control center were also destroyed, reducing the intensity of fire on certain frontline sectors. In the Gulay-Pole direction, Ukrainian warriors repelled 34 attacks, stopping breakthrough attempts near Myrne and Zaliznichne. The situation remains tense in the Pokrovsk and Slovyansk directions, where more than 40 enemy assault actions were recorded. Military analysts are given positive assessment. They say Ukraine has won the battle for winter.
Russia lost the battle for winter, and we won. First day of spring. The sleepy day is getting long, it's getting warmer. Ukraine will continue to fight. At the front over many months and perhaps even years, we began to gain more territory to spend.
Russia itself shakes in fear. Drones attacked Novorossiysk. From the air and from the sea, an oil terminal was on fire. In addition to strike drones approaching from the sea, the city was also reportedly targeted by USVs, unmanned surface vessels. This was stated, among others, by Novorossiysk Mayor Andrei Kravchenko. In his messages, the mayor reported traffic restrictions in the embarkment area as well as toward Kabardinka from the Shizharis district. The Shizharis oil terminal is a major maritime complex for receiving, storing and loading oil and petroleum products onto tankers. It is one of Russia's largest and most strategically important oil terminals. It plays a key role in the operations of the Novorossiysk seaport and the entire export infrastructure in the south of the country. Ukraine's defense forces continue to inflict losses on Russia in the rear and in temporarily occupied territories. Among the targets were a forward command post and enemy logistics facilities. The General Staff reported that strikes were carried out on a number of important Russian military facilities. These included a fuel and lubricants depot, ammunition storage, and material and technical supply warehouses in the Donetsk region. The strikes were recorded near Novoambrosivsk, Ambrosivka, and Bahatyr. Enemy logistics facilities in the temporarily occupied parts of Kherson region were also targeted. Warehouses of material and technical supplies and fuel depots exploded in the areas of Kalanchak and Myrne. They served a separate logistics brigade as well as motorized rifle and engineer sapper regiments of the Russian army. Separately, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine emphasized the strike on the forward command post of Russia's 127th Motor Rifle Division near Orlinsk in Donetsk region. The defense forces also continue striking enemy concentration areas. They hit near Dronivka in Russia's Belgorod region as well as near Rodinske and Berezove. Not by Ukrainian drones alone, Iranian fire is flying toward Russians. The Emirates are in flames. Iran's dying convulsions struck Russians as well. Tehran launched ballistic missiles and drones at cities in the United Arab Emirates, and Russian tourists in Dubai and other locations came under attack. Iran effectively struck the Russians. Russians apparently hoped to sit out the war in comfort, but the war reached them where they least expected it. In Sharjah, an Iranian drone pierced the roof of a massive shopping mall. The building has been completely destroyed. Thick smoke is billowing and people are trapped under the rubble. And living won't be easy. Wealthy Russians may have wanted to escape the missile apocalypse, but they cannot. People are effectively trapped. Iran struck Dubai airport, flights are grounded. An urgent evacuation has been announced. Meanwhile, in another terminal, people are sheltering from the shelling and sleeping right on the floor. Turns out Iran is no friend to Russia after all. Tehran sank Putin's tanker. An Iranian Shahed struck the tanker Skylight, part of the joint Iranian-Russian shadow fleet, with a direct hit. Near the Strait of Hormuz, the Putin-linked vessel loaded with sanctioned oil is rapidly going down. Residential buildings were hit as well. The luxury hotel Paros was also struck by an Iranian Giran drone. Meanwhile, in Bahrain, Iranian drones smashed into a base and flew straight into the Elite S hotel. Terrified tourists are filming the wreckage of the Giran drones from their balconies. The Middle East is on fire. The war between Iran and the Israel-American tandem is escalating. What is happening there right now, and most importantly, how Putin is reacting, coming up next.
Tehran in 3 days, carried out by the Air Force and Navy of Israel and the United States. Putin's worst nightmare has come true. Dictators are falling like dominoes. Some end up in Moscow City, some in an American prison, and some go straight to a Kobzon concert.
If tomorrow Israel, with or without the help of the United States, simply kills Khamenei, what would your reaction be and Russia's reaction?
It is my sincere hope that this will be the most comprehensive and suitable response to your question. I do not even wish to entertain the discussion of such a possibility.
A day after the start of massive shelling of Iranian territory, a state propagandist with tears in his eyes states Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei has been killed in a missile strike.
His Excellency Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, on the path of affirming the greatness of the sacred abode of the Islamic Republic. Iran has drunk the sweet and pure cup of martyrdom and has been reunited with the highest heavenly realm.
In addition to the head of state during the initial Tomahawk airstrikes, Washington and Tel Aviv eliminated a significant part of the military political leadership of the Islamic Republic, including IRGC commander Mohammad Pakpour and Iran's Minister of Defense, Aziz Nasirzadeh, and the head of intelligence Salah Assadi.
IDF spokesperson, during the first strike, we eliminated 40 commanders and high-ranking officials of the regime in just 1 minute.
The strike targeted the meeting place of Iran's top leadership. Prior to this, CIA agents had been tracking the movements of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei for several months. On Saturday morning, the last day of winter, 200 fighter jets carried out nearly 500 airstrikes on Islamist targets. In parallel with the months-long work of American intelligence, the vigilance of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps was lulled by Israeli aviation. For months, the IDF continuously bombed Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. Iranian intelligence let its guard down. And on day X, they slept through it right on the ice.
Where are the statements from these people? Where is the vaunted IRGC? Where are Khamenei's statements? None of them are here. That's it. This is a country that is falling apart before our eyes.
Meanwhile, as usual, Putler has taken up a circular defense in his deepest bunker and is not commenting on the elimination in any way. The dictator's colleagues.
They've just become completely brazen. They aren't embarrassed by anything. They just took Soleimani, killed the Iranian general.
Russian propaganda without a handed-down playbook is in turmoil. The most fanatical ones, led by the Belarusian parody of Solovyov Azarenok, are threatening to practically join the jihad.
Fight, Holy Iran, against the Epstein regime. Pedophile Satanists are that very Antichrist Dajjal, but the noble Ayatollah is leading his people into battle. And all of us around the world today are saying Allahu Akbar.
Most of the Z community is pretending that everything is fine and that what's happening is to Russia's advantage. It turns out that the state which provided the Kremlin with thousands of shaheeds for strikes on Ukraine is not an ally at all, but an enemy.
Once again, Shiite parties and their militants were overseen by Iran, armed by Iran, trained in Iran, and killed Soviet soldiers. All for the sake of the idea of the Islamic Revolution and a pro-Iranian Afghanistan. Therefore, when certain comrades nowadays shout that Russia should urgently start almost fighting for our Iranian brothers, I want to remind you that Iran has always acted in its own interests in relations with Russia, and sometimes, as we can see, has even fought against Russia.
Ali Khamenei is an old man who, frankly, has long been due to die.
He was almost 87 years old, but with all due respect, whether the US struck or not, it was his age. At least he left this world in battle, not in diapers and with caregivers.
The few Z supporters are making ironic remarks about yet another geopolitical victory for the bunker dweller.
A multipolar world. The beginning.
Despite the fall of the dictator, the regime survived. Iranian Shahed drones and missiles are striking Israel, numerous American military bases in the Middle East, as well as Washington's allied countries. Iranian state propaganda has reported new appointments to key positions. Ayatollah Ali Reza Arafi has become the interim spiritual leader, and Major General Ahmad Vahidi is now the commander of the IRGC. The influential Iranian theologian Makarem Shirazi has declared a holy war against the US and Israel.
Iran has just announced that today it will deliver a very powerful strike. More powerful than ever before. They had better not do it, because if they do, we will strike them with a force the world has never seen before.
The further fate of the regime and overall the future of Tehran depends on the streets. What actions will the Iranian opposition and Iran's closest neighbors take? Are ordinary Persians ready for new protests after the recent bloody crackdowns? We will find out the answers very soon.
The counteroffensive in the south of the country is in full swing, with hundreds of square kilometers returning under Ukrainian control. How the offensive is progressing and what losses the enemy is suffering, coming up next.
Don't want to sign a peace treaty? Then you'll sign a capitulation. While our Western partners, led by Donald Trump, have only just realized that you can't deal with Putin and the Kremlin or trust in Moscow's good intentions, the Ukrainian armed forces have taken matters into their own hands and, with the arrival of spring, have begun reclaiming their own territories.
Our counterattacks are taking place at the junction of three regions: Zlobin, Dnipropetrovsk, Donetsk, and possibly Zaporizhzhia region. These counterattacks are aimed at improving our tactical position and eliminating the enemy's infiltration groups that have penetrated deep into our battle formations.
Our defenders are confident, no matter what the bunker dweller says. It's all lies. The Russian offensive will stop only in one case, when the Kremlin has nothing and no one left to attack with.
There is no reason to expect that the Russian Federation will stop only at the borders of Luhansk and Donetsk regions. That is precisely why the top priority for both Ukraine and its global partners is to proactively prevent the occurrence of these scenarios, involving the further expansion and escalation of the theater of hostilities to other sovereign territories of Ukraine.
Thus, Ukraine's defense forces are carrying out successful and effective local counterattacks in certain sectors of the front. For a long time, this has prevented the Russian occupiers from advancing, particularly toward the Dnipropetrovsk region.
At present, it has not been possible to deliver the necessary number of personnel from the Russian rear from deep within Russia. And, in fact, let's add to this, if you look at the reports from the Ukrainian General Staff, every week there are strikes on personnel on the locations of Russian army troops in the temporarily occupied territories. Obviously, this affects the quality of the troops, their condition, and now also their numbers.
The main goal of the Ukrainian armed forces is to drive the Russian Vostok group out of the Dnipropetrovsk region and stabilize the front in the Zaporizhzhia area. The successful actions of our defenders in these directions have already led to the liberation of several settlements and hundreds of kilometers of territory within the regions. Thus, only a couple of villages near the administrative border remain occupied in the Dnipropetrovsk region. However, if you look at the maps, you can see that over the past few weeks, the Ukrainian armed forces have retreated from a number of positions directly on the front line, turning them into so-called gray zones. And while Russian propaganda presents this as a victory for the Kremlin, it turns out that our defenders have started using a new combat tactic there.
Today, the gray zone that exists in the Pokrovsk-Myrnohrad agglomeration is shrinking. Today, in some locations, there is no longer any physical presence of our troops. But this is not, let's say, some kind of sensational news, because small aviation is operating, our drones are working, which in turn prevent the enemy from advancing more intensively according to the deadlines the Russians have set for themselves.
All this gives analysts reason to say that the Ukrainian military campaign of 2026 has not only begun, but is entering an active phase. This is unclear only to the bunker dweller himself and his propagandists, who constantly twist the facts.
We are preparing an offensive, but we know nothing about any counteroffensive.
But it seems that even the propagandists themselves no longer believe that the Russian occupiers are capable not only of advancing, but even of holding the defense, hence the new narrative on Russian TV.
Russia is advancing in all DD directions. Even on Mordor's own broadcast, they can't figure it out. So who exactly is planning the offensive? In my opinion, this is a very interesting symptom. And again, we don't hear those exclamations here about how we need to go to Kyiv or somewhere else. No, they're talking about negotiations and ending the military actions.
So it turns out, no matter how much the bunker dweller and his generals bluster, he won't be able to seize another piece of Ukraine. But as for losing the territories already occupied, the Kremlin might lose them much faster than it seems.
No matter how much Western newspapers write that Putin is ready to fight until he dies, it may well be true until he dies. But that could happen in the foreseeable future. There are just too many factors pointing to this.
The Russian leadership boldly reports victories, citing staggering statistics as proof. Millions of fallen Ukrainian armed forces soldiers, hundreds of thousands pieces of destroyed equipment. The only problem is that these figures are blatant lies, and we will prove it using facts and simple math. Watch now.
For 4 years in a row, the Ministry of Murder of Russia has been publishing daily reports on the progress of the so-called special military operation.
The offensive is being conducted in all directions. The armed forces of Ukraine are suffering significant losses that they are unable to replenish.
Day after day, the same formulas are repeated: defeated, destroyed, liberated. Regardless of whether the front line actually shifted or not, first I analyzed these reports and compared them with open data and expert assessments. And the picture that emerges is not just a difference in calculations. It is an entire system of discrepancies between the reports and the facts.
The most striking data turned out to be about the number of losses in the AFU. Thus, over 4 years, the Russian army destroyed more than, according to SRPO, 3.2 people.
On paper, this looks like an absolute military catastrophe for Ukraine. In reality, however, things are completely different.
The Ukrainian army has held out and continues to stand firm, despite the fact that every year, and sometimes even every month, there are those who claim that the Ukrainian army is about to collapse, the front will fall, Russian troops will defeat everyone, and so on. But month after month, we see that the armed forces of Ukraine, despite enormous difficulties and problems, objective problems tied to factors they cannot change right now, still continue to defend their land, continue to hold the line, and overall do not allow the Russian army to achieve any significant results.
According to Military Balance, as of 2025, the total number of the armed forces of Ukraine was about 730,000 people. Even taking mobilization and rotation into account, the figure of 1 million killed looks mathematically impossible. Even the most die-hard Z-patriots understand this.
Yes, the Supreme Commander-in-Chief is being deceived.
But the most telling thing in this cycle of invented numbers is the dynamic. Until the fall of 2023, Russia was eliminating up to 500 Ukrainian servicemen daily. Then the number suddenly jumps to 1,500 per day. At the same time, weekly reports began to appear, already claiming 10 to 17,000 eliminated in a week. Such a colossal increase coincided with Russia's prolonged offensive actions, which were accompanied by heavy losses of their own and minimal successes. As a result, the more modest the outcome on the ground, the more grandiose it appeared in the reports.
Very slow advances with enormous losses. They come at an unbelievable cost, hundreds of thousands of human lives. The
same story applies to equipment. The Ministry of Defense reports tens of thousands of destroyed pieces of weaponry. Tanks, armored vehicles, artillery, airplanes, and helicopters. For example, in March 2024, the Ministry of Defense reported more than 15,000 destroyed tanks, nearly 600 airplanes, and hundreds of helicopters. According to World Air Force data, at the beginning of 2023, Ukraine had only 128 combat aircraft. Even taking into account the supplies, the numbers announced by the Russians exceed the actual fleet of aircraft.
In just 4 years of war, the Ministry of Defense reported 110,000 destroyed. UAVs, 27,000 tanks and armored vehicles, 680 airplanes, and 283 helicopters. Even if you count armored vehicles, the total is several times greater than what Ukraine had throughout the entire war. And it's the same across all indicators.
Not only are the numbers of deaths and equipment losses exaggerated, the Ministry of Defense regularly reports the liberation of settlements that are already under the control of Ukrainian forces. Moreover, some settlements have been reported as liberated several times in official updates. For example, Chief of the General Staff Gerasimov announced the capture of the Ukrainian city of Kupiansk in November.
The units of the West Group have liberated the city of Kupiansk, and
here he is again talking about the capture of the same city, only now in January.
Kupiansk-Kozlovoy has been liberated.
This tactic has jokingly been called credit captures by the ZAY supporters. A victory is recorded retroactively to maintain, so to speak, the image of success. And while the enemy paints these successes, the reality on the other side of the border is completely different.
It has been stated that we have about 700,000 people in the Special Military Operations Zone. Let's also look at the official data, the beginning of the SVO. The number was stated to be 400,000. The question immediately arises, is this taking into account the Donetsk Corps or not? But let's assume that without taking it into account. Next, mobilization of 300,000. Contract soldiers for 2022. I haven't come across the figure yet, but you can find it. That is how much the contract was signed for. 2023 plus 560,000. The year 2024 plus 400,000. For 2025, official data is about 400,000. There, 411, I think, have signed contracts. So in total, we have 2.2 million. The question is, given the difference between 7 and 100,000, there is a question about 1.5 million.
4 years of daily statistics have created a parallel picture of the war. In it, Ukraine is supposedly suffering catastrophic losses. Equipment is being destroyed faster than it can be produced. Settlements are being liberated several times over. And the higher these figures become, the closer Russians are to fiasco.
What do you think about the latest events? Share your opinion in the comments, like the video and subscribe to stay informed about the main headlines. See you soon!